Amani told herself she had a good life without Han, and didn't need all the turmoil his presence brought to her emotions. But even so, her resolve weakened each time she thought of his confession. 2 years passed, and Amani had worked tirelessly to build her business empire, far removed from the suffocating grip of the palace and the heartache that still haunted her dreams. But Han was never truly gone from her mind. Their time together lingered in her thoughts like a half-forgotten melody. One day, as Amani arrived at her store to oversee the delivery of a new batch of goods, her eyes were drawn to a figure waiting at the entrance. It was Han. His once princely demeanor was now shadowed with weariness, but his eyes still held that unmistakable intensity. Amani's heart froze, a sharp pain shooting through her chest. She had told herself she was prepared for this moment, if it ever came. She had rehearsed what she would say, how she would handle it, the calm indifference she would wear like armor. But now, she realized nothing could have truly prepared her for the reality of Han standing before her again. Han approached her, his steps hesitant at first, then resolute, as if he had practiced this encounter over and over in his mind. "Amani," he whispered, the sound of her name on his lips breaking through the years of distance between them. Amani's heart pounded, but her face remained expressionless. "What are you doing here?" she asked with a sharp voice. "I left the palace. For good," Han said. As he spoke, he searched her face for a sign, for anything that might indicate she still cared. But she only turned to her shop, pretending to inspect some silks, and said, "I don't know what that has to do with me. You made your choice a long time ago." Han's eyes darkened with pain, but he continued, "On the day of the assassination, the Emperor sent me on a mission outside the palace. He must have known that I would probably intervene. As soon as I got news of the plan, I hurried back to warn you. I never meant for things to go the way they did." Amani cut him off, saying, "That's no longer my concern. Prince Han." Her words were colder than she felt, but she couldn't let him in. "Not again. You're too late for this conversation," she told him. "You chose to stay behind when I needed you the most. I'm sorry for being a coward," Han said almost tearfully. "I was too afraid to leave, too afraid of what would happen if I defied the Emperor, but I'm not that man anymore." Amani turned away, her emotions overwhelming her. "I don't think I can forgive you," Han replied. "I've regretted my decision every single day, and I didn't know how to face you again. But I'm here now because I love you." Amani was surprised to hear him say this out loud. But Han repeated, "I've loved you for a long time, and I was a fool for taking so long to realize it." The silence that followed was deafening. Amani closed her eyes, her heart torn between the love she still felt and the hurt that lingered. Before she could reply, a soft voice interrupted them. "Who's this, Amani?" It was Meen. Her sharp eyes looked between them as she stood protectively in front of Amani. Han's eyes softened as he looked at Meen, happy that Amani had someone who cared about her. "I'm just an old friend," he said. Amani added, "And he was just about to leave," indicating that the conversation was over. With this, Han gave a slow, sorrowful nod and walked away, leaving Meen with many questions, and Amani, unsure if the walls around her heart could hold for very long. The days following their encounter were long and restless. Amani told herself she had a good life without Han, and didn't need all the turmoil his presence brought to her emotions. But even so, her resolve weakened each time she thought of his confession. The Lantern Festival arrived a week later. The streets were lined with vendors selling bright red lanterns, the air filled with the sound of laughter and music. Amani loved this time of year, but tonight, as she wandered the streets, her mind was miles away. Suddenly, she heard Meen call her name, pulling her back to the present. Meen was pointing at a lone figure in the street. It was Han. Again, he was holding a lantern and waiting for her. Meen tugged at her arm and said, "You should talk to him," her voice full of youthful wisdom far beyond her years. She hadn't asked about Amani's past, but could tell that these two had a deep history. Amani didn't move. She felt exposed, like all her emotions were on display for the world to see. So Han stepped forward, still holding the lantern. "What do you want now?" Amani asked. Han replied, "I promised to get you a lantern from the festival." Amani's heart clenched, remembering the passing request she had made years ago. "You remembered," she whispered. Han's voice was filled with emotion as he told her, "I remember every moment I spent with you. I was foolish to let you go once, but I won't let you go again. I don't know how to prove to you just how much I love you, but I'll do whatever you need me to, as long as you're willing to give me a chance." For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Amani looked intensely at Han, searching his gaze for any hint of deceit. Then, with a soft voice, she said, "I don't know if I can trust you again." Han reached out, gently placing the lantern in her hands, and said, "Then let me spend the rest of my life proving that you can." The walls Amani had built around her heart came crashing down, and she found herself saying, "I guess I can try." Han, unable to contain his joy, pulled her into a tight embrace, holding her like he never wanted to let go again, the warmth of his body against hers, the feeling of finally surrendering to the love they had both fought so hard to resist. It was overwhelming. And then he kissed her. It wasn't like the stolen kiss of their past, filled with confusion. This kiss was slow, deliberate, and intentional. It contained the things they had never said, the years they had spent apart, and the love they had kept hidden beneath layers of pain and regret. Onlookers stared in shock, but Amani barely noticed. There was only Han, and the feeling of finally giving in to what she had denied for so long. A few weeks later, just as Amani and Han's relationship began to stabilize, an unexpected visitor arrived. It was a quiet afternoon when the stranger appeared at the door of Amani's store. His clothes were foreign, his face weathered from travel, his skin the same color as Amani's, and his presence commanded immediate attention. "You are Amani, daughter of General Alim?" the man asked, in a language that Amani understood but did not remember learning. Amani froze, and the man smiled, seeing that she understood him. Daughter of General Alim? The title felt distant, like a name from a past she had long buried. So Amani was really her name. She had always wondered about that. The stranger stepped forward, his expression serious. "I bring news of your family. Your father, General Alim, is gravely ill. He and your mother have been searching for you for years. Years ago, you followed your father on a long voyage to explore distant kingdoms, and there was a shipwreck where you were lost. Everyone thought you were dead, but your parents have never stopped searching." He produced a pendant similar to the one Amani always wore, and it fit perfectly, forming a whole. Amani stood in stunned silence as this reality hit her. My father, my mother, the memories of her former life, hazy and fragmented, began to surface. After all that she had endured, it was hard to imagine a family that loved her enough to keep searching for her all these years. The man continued, "You need to return. Your father is near death, and your mother has never stopped grieving for the daughter she lost. If you don't come back soon, it might be too late." This was too much to take in at once. "I need some time to think," Amani told him. "Of course, mistress," the man replied. "I will be here in a few days to hear your answer." With that, the man left. That evening, Amani wrestled with the decision. On one hand, she had a life here, a life she had built with her own hands. She had Han, who she had finally opened her heart to again. She had Meen, who relied on her, and she loved deeply. But on the other hand, her parents were still alive. They had been searching for her all these years, and now they needed her. If Amani were honest with herself, she knew what her choice would be. Meen would probably follow her anywhere, but her real worry was, would Han come with her this time? The next day, as was his habit, Han came to visit and help out at the store. The moment he entered, he knew from Amani's grim expression that something was off. "Is everything all right?" Amani explained the previous day's events. Han was surprised, but also happy to hear that Amani's family was still alive. Seeing that she was still gloomy, Han asked, "What's wrong? Aren't you happy you found your parents?" Amani answered softly, "I am. It's just that I'll have to leave everything behind again." Amani deliberately avoided his eyes as she said this. Meen, who had been listening, asked with a fearful voice, "Will you come back?" Amani pulled her into her arms and said, "I don't know, but no matter what happens, you're my family, and nothing will ever change that. If you would like, you can come with me." The little girl excitedly said, "Yes, please take me with you." Unable to delay the inevitable any longer, Amani turned to Han, but before she could say anything, Han said, "I'll come with you too." Surprise and relief flooded Amani, and she stuttered, But Han, this is the only home you've ever known. Will you be okay?" Han hugged her and said, "My home is where you are, darling." Then he added, "Besides, I also need your father's approval to marry his daughter." Amani blinked back tears. She had been scared to ask him to come with her, fearing that her hopes would once again be shattered. But instead, she found unwavering support, love, and the promise of forever. She threw her arms around Han's neck and cried happy tears. "I'll take that as a yes then," Han said, and Amani laughed as she nodded. Meen jumped with delight and joined in the hug. Over the next few days, Amani made arrangements for her assistant to manage the business, gathering enough gold and possessions to last a few years, along with gifts for her family. The day finally came for Amani, Han, and Meen to set out on the long journey to her homeland. At the dock, they stood in awe of the ship prepared by the messenger. Its size and beauty was beyond anything they had imagined. When the messenger saw the gold Amani had brought for the journey, he smiled and said, "You will not need all this, Mistress Amani. Your father is the wealthiest general in the kingdom." Hearing this, Han grinned and remarked, "I guess I'm lucky to be marrying a wealthy wife," which made them all laugh. As Amani embarked on this new chapter of her life, she glanced at Han and Meen, her heart swelling with gratitude and love. The road ahead was uncertain, but with them by her side this time, she was finally not alone.